good, Cowboys Nation? Thank you guys so much for joining me this evening. It's wonderful Monday evening. It's actually a start to a really good week, and just wanted to hop on and go live. I know the Cowboys touched down earlier today in Oxnard, California, for a training camp. And I just want to do a live right quick. Not going to be here too long. Just kind of want to share my thoughts on before the practices actually kick off. Just want to kind of talk about some training camp things and just kind of get you guys' thoughts too. Talk about the tight end group. I know in the long off season, me and my girl Star went live. If you guys been keeping up this off season, talking about position battle groups and things like that. And I just kind of want to talk about the tight ends. I don't know if we really got too deep into that room, but you guys know how I feel about tight ends. And I kind of want to talk about that a little bit. Also talk about the opening press conference. I can talk a lot about that. I didn't get a chance to really fully listen to it fully. It was about an hour long, and I listened to it on the way home, but of course, like the first half hour of it was Jerry and Stephen Jones, and I really just want to be able to go back and listen to a lot of what Schotty had to say. But I did get some notes from him. There's some things I want to talk about, some things that he actually he pointed out that I was excited about, and talking about some of those things. Of course, we heard some things about how Jerry Jones felt about Trayvon Diggs, Micah Parsons even. They definitely spoke on some of those things as well. So we'll definitely jump into that. So let's go ahead and jump into the show. We're not going to be here long. Shout out to Dak Owens, already in the building. Appreciate you, fam. Before we start off, make sure you guys hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button. And also, if you can, give me a thumbs up in the chat if you can hear me. Just making sure the sound is straight, make sure everything is straight. As you guys see, I'm kind of set up outside, so I just want to make sure everything's flowing right before we really get kicked off into the show. So I'm not gonna dwell too long on introductory to things like that. As you guys know, like I said earlier, the players touched down in Oxnard, and usually, as you guys know, I've been at the camp the last couple years. Not going to go this year. I'm actually going to just put the money towards going to a game, actually, because actually a few weeks ago, I actually drove down to North Carolina for a conference. The drive isn't really even all that long, so I just said I'll go down there for the Carolina game. So you guys I definitely add some footage and some clips from that. I went to the Carolina game a couple years ago, and that was definitely fun. I think I went last season as well, so definitely be interesting to see them. I think playing them, a third year in a row, second year in a row, something like that. We know this year they drafted Ted McMillan. I think Rico Dowdle went there for his new contract. I think he got a year worth contract going down there. So just definitely excited to be able to watch that game. I took my pops for his birthday a couple of years ago, and I like going down to North Carolina. Not too bad of a drive, and I think it'll be a nice little road trip situation, for me to be able to do. So like I said, go ahead and jump into it. We're gonna take a look at this a clip of the players actually arriving at camp, hopping off the buses, things like that. And let me see if I can bring it up quickly for you guys. Let me see. Oh, my bad. Hold on. Let me get this. That's actually the sound clip from the presser, but we haven't gotten there yet. But yeah, let me bring up this the players arriving on the bus. It's just a very exciting time. Like I said, just me going to camp the last couple of years. It's always exciting to see see the players up close, kind of personal. Of course, not personally. We don't know these guys, but always exciting to see them kind of show up, doing football things. Finally be able to step up and hit, put the pads on, really kind of get into the football feeling of it all. We kind of start over. We saw Tyler Booker, Solomon Thomas. We see Sam Williams here to start off. Definitely excited to see what he can bring this upcoming season. Go ahead, pause it right quick. Like I said, we see Sam Williams. Kind of touch on him a little bit. Like I said, I'm excited to see what he can bring forth. Very, very deep defensive edge group we have going into this 2025 season. Like I said, I'm excited to see what he can bring. I mean, they finally got around to signing Donovan Ezraku, second rounder. He got his contract, his things finally figured out pretty late, right before camp, pretty much the weekend before camp. So we'll see, what kind of effect, if any, it has on, maybe where Sam Williams falls on the roster. We also know we have Marshawn Nealon from just last season. I believe a second round pick as well, who'll be competing for, one of the starting roles, Dante Fowler, who they brought back after a double-digit sack season. So it'll definitely be an interesting room to watch and see just how these guys get down. And just in my opinion, I feel like Sam Williams is one of those guys. I kind of made a list of maybe just some draft picks, who may, may be in trouble of maybe not making the roster. And I think Sam Williams will still make the roster. I just think that, with the moves that they made in the offseason and bringing in, really making that. And I know that was the room kind of hit the hardest last season because of injuries, but I feel like with the guys that they have brought in, it does make it just, slightly tougher on Sam Williams to kind of step up. We know that he, got hurt, very, very early in the season, pretty much training camp last year. So hopefully be, healthy, good to go, come back, show his full strength on the field. Doesn't necessarily have as many sponsors that they had in the room before, but I think the coaches will definitely give him a fair chance to see what, he's definitely fast at the line of scrimmage, able to get after the quarterback, do some things around the line of scrimmage, just really kind of, especially playing on the other side of a guy like Micah Parsons. And even, back when D-Law was here playing with him, he just kind of brought, just another facet to that line. So I'm excited to see what he actually can bring. And just some other guys we've seen coming off the bus. We see Osa as well back there. We know he got his contract extension. We see Shamar James, who just walked by there. Kenneth Murray, of course, Tyler Booker, first round pick of this season. Definitely excited to see this young man and what he can bring. I really feel like he's really showing a lot of leadership. I love just him kind of stepping into the forefront, like not too much, not to step on anybody's toes, but I feel like he's really showing his what kind of leadership he can potentially bring years down the line. I'm saying he definitely has great examples. Of course, Tyler Smith, he's up for his contract coming up this season, but he's showing a great example of what a leader can look like when you come in, having to take on such a strong role at first, kind of taking over for Tyron Smith when he was out. Tyler Smith, he kind of took over Tyron's spot when he got hurt, and then from there, now he's moved inside. I think just this past season was ranked one of the top, inside linemen of the league. So, he was asked about that in his interview, just when the guys arrived at camp today. He said he doesn't really put too much emphasis on it, but he definitely does, loves the recognition, loves that he's able to kind of build each year on his game. And it just be really excited to see what he can bring. And then, along the same side, Tyler Booker, he said he's played both sides. He's played both the left and right side as far as guards in college. So it kind of prepared him, slowly but surely. And also, of course, working with Duke Manyweather, it's kind of prepared him to kind of move to that right side. And then just to kind of play along, that line, along with the other guys, Cooper Beebe, Terrence Steele, of course, Tyler Guyton. I just think this offensive line as a whole can just, really just, shift into their own. These are a lot of young guys. It's really just really be like a foundational year, for the start of our own line going forward. We have some very, very short of depth pieces, as we know, with TJ Bass, Brock Hoffman, guys they've also brought in Johnny Cornelius. I forget the guy they picked up from Washington, a veteran that they brought in just his past offseason, that can kind of shore up the room a little bit. But also just some younger guys too, like Hoffman and Bass, who have been there for a while. They could be some great depth pieces, but they've also gotten the reps, in game to kind of prepare them for, for moments like that. So I'm excited to see his O-line and just how they're able to push forward and just what they can, if they can kind of, bring us a new spark to this offense. Of course, that was Solomon Thomas, who just went by. And just seeing some of the guys come on, Awesome Richards. There's really a mix of offense, offense and defense. CJ Goodwin, Tolbert, of course. And this is definitely one guy you can see it. That was Patrick O.C. Walker. Shout out to him. Dapping up John Stevens Jr., back here. We know that, he got hurt. I think I don't know if he tore the same knee twice or if he, I think, messed up both knees. I'm not entirely sure. I got to check up on that. But, he's definitely coming back from having, 2 years in a row pretty much of a knee injury, 2 years in a row. And, we're definitely looking at him to see, number one, if he can come back, get back to who he was before. Because I'm definitely excited. I mean, you guys know when I went out to camp there last year, I got a lot of footage, of him. I was able to actually get, an interview with him off to the side before he went back to the locker room, of course, when, after camp was over. But, and he said even last year, just talking about, playing in McCarthy's offense, McCarthy's love, his tight end and tight ends and things like that. And him coming on so early and them having packages and, them running him very, very often in the preseason, a couple years ago, and then him getting some action in some games. It was interesting to me. He didn't get a ton of action. I'll take that back, but it was good to see him get some run, right? And then last season, definitely sucked when he got the injury because it's like, man, like we didn't really get to see a ton. I think he got hurt in preseason, if I'm not mistaken. So we really didn't get to see a ton from John Stevens Jr. So I'm definitely excited to see what he can bring to the room. My tight, and I'll go ahead and just get into it because we're talking about the tight ends, but I'm definitely excited to see, what Jake Ferguson can bring, coming back. He talked about it a little bit in one of his interviews about how he, wants to get back to scoring, scoring a touchdown. He said it wasn't just about the whole season not scoring. He said he, kind of kept that in the back of his mind pretty much since week one, knowing that he hadn't scored a touchdown. So I'm sure it hangs in the back of our minds, right, as fans, but it definitely hangs in the back of the minds of these players who feel like they should be contributing to the team, who feel like they're not playing up to their full potential. And hearing Jake Ferguson speak about that, it just kind of reminds me that he'll definitely get back to his old self. Hopefully, and they brought in enough help to where he shouldn't have to help, with the offensive line having to be an extension of them. And at the same time, he can kind of get back to who he is. And also, that also allows for the other tight ends to step up into their roles. Like we have a, Luke Schoonmaker, who's able to be a full participant this offseason, able to go. I believe he went on that trip, Dak took the skilled players, the wide receivers, the other quarterbacks. I believe Schoonmaker was on that trip, with the running backs and things like that. Shout out to Todd Archer. He tweeted an article, about 5 things that he was looking forward to as far as training camp. And one of the things that he brought up in his article was that Schoonmaker was actually, let me see if I can bring up the article right quick. That Schoonmaker was actually an active participant in the locker room, I'm saying? And that's something that I think Jake Ferguson did last season. He spent a lot of time, Lunda Wells spoke about that. Jake Ferguson kind of bulking up in the locker room, putting in just a little bit of weight on, just so that he can kind of, take some of those hits. And I'm not sure if it had a negative effect on his year. We saw, how his year went, but hopefully we won't see, the exact same from Luke Schoonmaker. But I think him, number one, being a full participant, definitely does something for his confidence, because that's something he hasn't been able to do, up until this season, up until this off season. And then, it kind of gives him, allows him to be more involved with the room, more involved with the tight end room, more involved with the team. And, he doesn't, hopefully, he won't fall so, not saying he was far behind in previous years, but, obviously if you're missing time with the team, you fall behind in some regard. Hold on, my bad, y'all, my volume. I clicked on this, the article from Todd Archer, sorry. But yeah, let me see if I can find it quickly. Yeah, Todd Archer says in this article, because really he was speaking about Brevin Spanford, who I'll get to in a second, but he mentioned Schoonmaker, saying that this is the first offseason Schoonmaker was able to be a full participant. Injuries his first 2 years kept him off the field and hurt his development. I'm told he was one of the more impressive players in the weight room this offseason. Spanford's development is nice, but don't forget about Schoonmaker just yet. So, I mean, that gives me a little confidence in Schoonmaker. I'm not going to lie. He's an excellent blocker. Doesn't mind stepping up in that regard. I would definitely love to see him. Hold on, let me look like the video went to black, but I'll just bring myself back up. But yeah, I think Schoonmaker can definitely, he definitely catch those seam passes. What I'm saying? He can definitely catch touchdown passes. Not afraid of doing that. So, not saying he needs to be the red zone target, but as far as moving down the field, we could definitely use him in that regard. So I like that he's taking it upon himself to kind of step up into his role, what he needs to do, and hopefully the rest of the tight ends will follow suit. Just like I mentioned, like I was about to mention Brevin Spanford. Even Ferguson mentioned that it's been Spanford who's been kind of pushing him to get into the weight room, to kind of get out there and do reps, pushing it extra hard, trying to do, get ready for camp, doing conditioning and things like that. And I mean, that's just something, who was it? I think it was Tyler Booker saying he was going to be like that annoying rookie for a Tyler Smith, right? And I think maybe Brevin Spanford kind of took it upon himself to be like that. I hate to use the word annoying, but you know what I mean, like being that rookie to Jake Ferguson, because he was the only undrafted person, only undrafted player to make the team last season. Brevin Spanford, so it has to give him some kind of a boost of confidence. Granted, Mike McCarthy loves tight ends, and maybe that could have been the reason why he made the team, but he was able to step up, show what he had. McCarthy kind of put him in some iffy situations every now and then, but he was able to, definitely able to block some big bodies out there. And I think he had a pretty decent camp. Like I said, just wasn't able to show fully what he was potential, show his full potential during the season, of course, because I think Schoonmaker stepped up late in the year. Of course, Jake Ferguson kind of being in and out throughout the season. So I think Brevin Spann-Ford, definitely with his height, I think he's 6'8", well over, I think 250 plus. So I think, I'm really excited to see what Brevin Spann-Ford can bring, because I was able to actually interview him as well last season before he was able to go to the locker room too. And he kind of said the same thing along the similar lines, like, kind of being a big tight end in McCarthy's scheme. I know this year is different, but kind of being a big tight end in the scheme, you could be multiple, you know what I mean? You can go out there and block, like Jake Ferguson mentioned, 13 personnel. You get those tight ends out there and you can run the ball down the opposing team's throats, you know what I'm saying? You can do gap scheme, you can where you attack the gaps, and I think we have the running backs to kind of do that. We have a Javonte Williams, even a Phil Moffitt. In my opinion, I think Phil Moffitt will kind of come along later in the season. But I feel like he can definitely come for that number 2, possibly number 3 spot, because he is a downhill runner, run it down your throat type runner. So I think he can. I love Phil Moffitt. I love his footwork, and I love that he, even he said it during the rookie orientation that he loves to hit people. He loves to, really just kind of drive downhill. So I'm excited to see him. And like I mentioned with the 13 personnel, bringing this other tight ends, you Schoonmaker, Brevin Spann-Ford, Ferg. Just those 3 in itself, you know what I mean? And when Hunter Luepke is kind of getting I don't know if he's still getting cross-trained for both, but Schottenheimer has been kind of talking about him more so in the running back light. But, I mean, him being able to do, he can, go out wide and line up, as a receiver. You know what I'm saying? We see him do things like that, you know what I mean? And, he blocks very well. He blocks very well, too, you know what I'm saying? And as far as pass pro, he can do all that. You know what I'm saying? I think that's why, that's another point I got from the presser, is that Schotty, he's not going to let, Hunter Luepke be forgotten. You know what I'm saying? We talk a lot about Javonte Williams, Jaden Blue, there's an article that came out recently about him. We talk about the veterans that they brought in that running back room, but, a lot of people aren't really talking about Deuce, even Hunter. I think that's why Schotty keeps bringing him up. He's not going to let, anybody really forget about him, you know what I'm saying? Because I think that's one of his guys. I feel like he's going to find a way to use Hunter, whether it's through blocking, whether it's through ball handling. I think he's going to, I think the same thing with Deuce as well. I think, they kind of feel him out as far as through preseason, but I feel like, Deuce will kind of get an extra chance to kind of see what else he can bring, you know what I'm saying? Maybe with punt return, maybe with kick returns, maybe, with, some ball handling things. Hey, shout out to Stephen White. What's up, fam? How you doing? Really appreciate you joining me. Really appreciate it, man. Really appreciate it. Just kind of talking about, a few things about training camp, the players arriving, coming off the bus, and just kind of talk, at the same time, kind of talk about the tight ends or running backs, and just really just kind of giving my overall thoughts, about camp, with practicing, getting ready to kick off tomorrow. So I'm definitely excited. A shout out to Lee Harrison as well in the Facebook groove. Hey, I really appreciate you guys jumping in. Really appreciate you. Yeah, like I said, I'm just kind of giving my training camp thoughts. And if you guys want to give some thoughts as well, make sure you guys hit up the chat. Make sure you guys, I also have, have a question that way you guys can kind of follow along. What position group are you guys gonna be looking at? Because me specifically, I'm definitely going to be looking at the tight ends. That's, of course, as you guys know, it's one of my favorite groups to look at. And the DBs as well. I'm definitely going to be looking at the cornerbacks. We'll talk about that just, a little bit before we jump off of here. But my main groups today are going to be the tight ends and running backs. So I think that's something that Schottenheimer hit on in the press conference. And like I said, looking at the video of the players coming off the bus, and previously I saw John Stevens Jr. That's really how I kind of got in the tight ends. But I'm excited to see what he can bring and if he can get back to who he was in these past couple seasons. So we'll keep looking at some of the players coming off the bus. Like I said earlier, that's Tolbert. Like I mentioned, that was John Stevens Jr. And shout out to, before we do go any further, like I said, Patrick and O.C. Walker, right here with the locks and the glasses, and also Tommy Yarish. He's up and coming. He's definitely very young, but definitely one of my favorite Dallas Cowboys beat writers. He definitely comes with the facts, and he, seems to have a lot of in-depth, interviews and, kind of closest with the players. And I love, the perspective that he kind of brings as well. We're going to have some more of the guys coming up. I think that's Jalen Cropper coming off the bus right there. Trayshawn Holden. Kalen Carson right here in the black. And Miles Sanders as well. Like I was talking about earlier with the running backs, Schottenheimer kind of talked about it, the running backs a little bit in the press conference. He kind of mentioned that, and this I think me and Star kind of talked about it too, but he kind of pretty much solidified what I said in our show, a couple, or was it last week, a couple of days ago, where he said that, it's pretty much going to be an open forum for competition. Just kind of talking about what he said. He pretty much said running back room will be open forum. He said the vets are showing why they're here, but they're both very different. And like I mentioned earlier, Schotty doesn't want to let Hunter Licky be forgotten. And he pretty much says that the competition will pretty much go throughout camp and then into the preseason. So, and just hearing that, in my opinion, I feel like, maybe game one, the scrimmage against the Rams, and then maybe game one would be the veterans. I feel like the veterans will get not a lot, but, practice work, scrimmage work, because they kind of see what they have. But I think as far as the veterans, they're trying to see which one better fits, our run scheme. And, I don't think we're going to carry two veterans. I think they're going to kind of whittle out the veterans, pick one as far as the veterans, between Sanders and Williams. And then maybe, game two or maybe be Hunter Lipke, Deuce Vaughn. You can maybe kind of see what they can hack. I don't feel like Hunter will be cut. I feel like Deuce, although he does have Connor Riley, I feel like, I don't know. Cause I feel like I said earlier, I think they can kind of work in Deuce with the punt returns, kick return. I know, Turpin is our returner, but I feel like with him possibly getting worked more into the offense, I feel like that maybe leaves maybe a slight door open for Deuce to kind of get in with the returns. You know what I mean? Maybe a Turpin could do kick returns, and then maybe Deuce can do punt returns. You know what I'm saying? Or vice versa, whichever. I just want to see if maybe Deuce can get worked in there a little bit more, just to see if, what we can get out of him before we decide to let him go, if they do decide to cut him. Steven says, I hope they use Hunter. It was one fumble. Yeah, no, man. It's like Steven, it's like he's not living down like that one fumble, that one exchange in that Miami game a couple years ago. And it kind of sucks, even to, I think they gave the demerit to Dak, but even to this day, it's kind of like, whose fault was it, right? So it kind of sucks. I think it goes against Hunter, but I do like he's still getting a chance. I hope that he does get a fair chance. He definitely brings a lot. I mean, because I think it was the Patriots game. He had a very good game against them, and I think the Giants as well. That a couple years ago. So he definitely can bring something to this team. Yeah, Stevens is still in the mix. I mean, he's there, right? I mean, I saw him come off the bus. And honestly, and I hate to say this, but like he was one of my favorite players, and not that I forgot about him, but it just kind of sucks that he had the injury, right? So I'm wondering where he is in his rehab. I haven't heard a lot about him. I haven't heard too much about maybe where he is, but I hope that he can kind of get work back in. I don't know if he's still with the rehab group or if he's, because he wasn't. I believe he wasn't drafted, so maybe they just don't report too much, maybe on guys who are, maybe gone, maybe I'm not even gonna say gone by the wayside, but maybe just hopefully we'll hear more about him throughout camp, because I feel like he had potentially had a big role with this team, and I know that was with McCarthy. I don't know if Schottenheimer has the same ideals, but we'll definitely see. Yeah, Stephen White says Carson is tall. Yeah, Deuce is not a returner. Yeah, I feel you. I feel you, Stephen White. I'm just just excited to see if he can bring, because I don't know if he can carve it out in that running back room, just with both veterans that they brought in and both guys that they drafted, and with Hunter Lipke. Like, I just feel like I don't know if Deuce will be the odd man out. You feel me? He said waiting for Stevens is like waiting for TJ Vasher. Yeah, I feel you. Yeah, or even Moreno Cropper. I mean, well, I don't know. Moreno Cropper didn't get hurt, so I'm not gonna say that, but I don't know. It kind of sucks that when he got that second injury, and I think, like I said, I think it was to the same knee. So I don't know just how well he will come back. But like I said, I'm just excited to see how he does work into camp, because that tight end room, I mean, I think that's going to be an open forum. You know what I'm saying? I think Jake Burks. Well, actually, no, I'll take that back, because I think the work that Brevin has showed, and then like I mentioned earlier with Schoonmaker having a full off season, I think those will probably end up being your top three, your starting three, if they decide to keep 3 or 4, I'm saying, then, maybe the fourth one will be, I'm saying, let me see if I can bring up the names right quick. I don't know why I'm drawing the blank on tight ends, but even looking at the rest of the names, I just brought the names up. Princeton, Fant. I mean, John Stevens Jr., I think, would be that fourth tight end if he wasn't, I mean, I'm not gonna say that, but if he comes back healthy, he could possibly be that fourth, maybe that practice squad tight end, but Princeton fan, he's been around for a while. I like how he plays as well. He had a good camp last season. And as far as the undrafted guys, Tyler Neville, Rivaldo, Fairweather. I haven't really watched a lot of Fairweather. I know Tyler Neville kind of had, he has a story. I think they say he, was kind of going through some health issues, and he was able to kind of push through, and they was able to kind of, sign with the Cowboys. So we'll see what these undrafted guys have as well going into camp. And, we have Treshawn Holden, wide receiver who, pretty much said I'm coming for heads. I'm excited to see what he can show as well. What we know, this wide receiver room is really, really, really deep. So we'll see just how, I think practice squad for him, but he can be a great practice squad guy. I mean, and there's also another guy, I don't think he'll make the team, but another practice squad guy, Kelvin Harmon. I love his height, and I think he had a decent camp last season. I like his length, and he shows some physicality around the ball as well. I think, he can high point the ball, but I would have liked to see, I would like to see him over Pickens, but before they did bring the Pickens in, I would have liked the Cowboys to go after a receiver like with his type build. You know what I'm saying? Physical, tall receiver who can high point the ball, but they ended up bringing in Pickens, so I'm definitely not mad at that. Of course, you guys saw the thumbnail. That's where I got it from. It's George Pickens showing up. Of course, they had to get him. And a Moreno Cropper next to him. And then I think at the Pickens is Terp. Oh, yeah, it's Joe Milton. I think that was Deron Bland for him as well. And then, of course, Malik Hooker, Marquise Bell. I think that was Donald sneaking off the bus right there. Then, of course, Terp, the last one. Not the last one, but the last one they have here on camera before it cuts out. But yeah, I just wanted to show that, show the guys kind of getting off the bus, showing up. Now I'm very excited to see them show up to camp. You know what I'm saying? It's been a long off season, long time coming for football to be back. And I'm excited to see how things, kind of pan out. You know what I'm saying? Steven says Holden comes out in the Madden Sims. He gets targets too. Madden says Holden makes the team. I'm not mad at that. I guess I got to watch his tape. And I think it was the wide receivers coach, Junior Adams, who, kind of had his eye on Holden and, was able to kind of bring him in. So I'm excited to see what he can bring, I think they said it's about 12, maybe 13 wide receivers. I didn't count exactly, but about 12 receivers in this room who's trying to make the team, and they decided to keep 5 or 6. So, that's going to be, that's obviously the thickest, toughest competition, thickest room on our, for our team. And it's definitely going to be a battle. I think the guys who have been here in previous seasons, maybe like a Moreno Cropper, like I mentioned earlier, Harmon, maybe guys who, may fall by the wayside. But, this is kind of like, shout out to Bosh Lombardi. He came on the show with me and Star, and that was a dope ass show that we did. And I'm very happy he was able to come through. On one of his shows, he kind of mentioned, kind of trimming the fat, and there's no disrespect to anybody and none of the players, because, players who have been here for years, that kind of shows, that they know the program, they're familiar with the organization, familiar with the building, familiar with the players, maybe some coaches, that shows seniority, it shows familiarity, that shows, responsibility even, because there's been a lot of guys, even some draft picks who have been cut, from this Cowboys team. So I think, guys who have been here for a while, like, I talk about Moreno Cropper, I'm saying guys who have been around for a while, call him a practice squad guy. I call him that, I'm saying, but, he keeps a job, he's able to kind of short the practice squad when they need guys out there to, maybe show some similarities to maybe some receivers that they're going to face. He's a good guy to have in practice, but I think with this competition, like Schotty was talking about today, the pressure about competition, hopefully winning out, and hopefully with these guys, let me see, about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, about 10 guys, and then a couple guys were UDFAs. Yeah, about 12 wide receivers. So I feel like, maybe the 6, of course would be Lamb, Pickens, Turpin, Tolbert, Mingo. Of course we get the trade and everything, but a lot of these other guys, I think, these are a couple guys I had on my list. And I was talking when I mentioned, drafted players, who could be. This is actually going to be another show I was going to do, but I'm just going to kind of, lump into this one. It was another show I had titled "Which Drafted Players Are Potential Cut Candidates," and it for both Brooks and Flournoy, because I didn't realize. I realized it, but for some reason it seems like Ryan Flournoy has been here for a long time for whatever reason. At least for me, I'm saying, but he was only just drafted in the 6th round last year, and then the year before that, Jalen Brooks was drafted in the 7th round. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like it's kind of like wow, like, and I understand why the Cowboys, they were looking for a guy to be able to pair with CeeDee Lamb, but they finally was able to get a number 2 wide receiver, 1A, if you will, however you want to call it, to kind of pair with CD. So now all these guys that they've gotten, even a Tolbert, Tolbert has stepped up year by year, and Schotty likes to remind us he led the team in touchdowns last season, but now you have Brooks and Flournoy, and potentially, I think Tolbert's gonna make the team, of course, but now you have 3 receivers, what I'm saying, who could easily be cut, or at least 2 who could easily be cut, 2 drafted players who you could possibly, could have gotten other positions with those picks, but instead you were trying to replace, and now you're kind of stuck with 2 receivers who you probably don't even really need, you know what I mean? So, in my opinion, we could potentially see 2 drafted wide receivers be cut. I'm saying maybe they retain them for the practice squad. That could be a possibility as well. And even Stephen White, Holden has good film, and even with a receiver like Holden in the room, what I'm saying, if he can go out in camp and really, put the pedal to the metal and outshine, because Brooks was, a camp guy last season. What I'm saying, Flournoy showed some things. He had some fumbles in the preseason and things like that. But if a guy like Holden can come out and upstage a Brooks, upstage a Flournoy, that could really cause some it'll make for some interesting camp. I don't know if it'll be camp talk, I'm saying, because I don't think they're going by draft stock, because we've seen draft picks go out the door. Eric Scott, a junior for Hoko, I'm saying, who was one of my favorite guys, I think, a few years ago, I'm saying, and we still had Quinn, I believe. We've seen drafted prospects, kind of be tossed out, I'm saying? So I don't think it's unheard of to see maybe drafted players kind of go by the wayside. That's earlier where I was talking about Sam Williams. They brought in Donovan Ezeraku. They have Marshawn Nealon. They brought back Dante Fowler. And I think we need these guys in the room. At the same time, it's like you can only keep so many for the roster and only keep so many for game day, right? Yeah, Steven says, Vox was saying have multiple wide receivers that do the same job is exact, and that's exactly the show I was talking about. Stephen White, that's exactly what he said. He's like, you can, and also the same, at least in my opinion, I think it runs along the same lines with the running backs as well. Like, I think you have two veterans. I'm saying you have 2 younger guys, and then you have 2, Deuce and Hunter, who has been here for each, for a couple years, 3 years, I think. Well, actually, no, just a couple years for both of them. And it's like, you kind of have to whittle down. You don't want to have 2 guys who do the same exact thing. So, you might keep a Williams or you might keep a Sanders, but you more than likely won't keep both. I'm saying? You'll probably keep a Williams. And this is me right here, but you'll probably keep a Williams and keep Phil Maffa for now. But in my opinion, I feel like Phil Maffa will kind of step up into that bulldozer, kind of like that. I don't know if he'll carry the main load, but I feel like maybe after this season, maybe he can step up into that role. And I know he's still a rookie and things like that, but I feel like he can be that bulldozer for the Cowboys. I feel like with the right offensive line, with the right coach that we brought in this season, I feel like Phil Maffa can kind of step up and, really just kind of, like I said, I don't know if he'll be the starting running back, but I feel like he can be the number 2 running back to kind of, get those dirty yards, you know what I mean? So I feel like, you'll kind of trim the fat with the running backs, and you'll definitely trim the fat with the wide receiver, like you were saying, Stephen White, because a lot of these guys, like I have the list up. I don't know if you guys, because I have like I'll just share with you guys right quickly, because it's not even that serious. It is really, the workhorse back. Yes, that's what I'm talking about, Stephen White, because I feel like I said, and I think, like I said earlier, I think Schotty will let the competition kind of prevail in training camp, but I feel like right away it's not going to be Blue and Maffa. They kind of started off, but I feel like as the season goes on, maybe even when we get down to week 7, week 8, week 9, when they decide to trade players or cut a player, things like that, maybe they'll try to trade Javonte Williams or Sanders, whichever one they decide to keep, or maybe decide to cut one of them. They try to bring on the younger guys once they kind of get their feet underneath them and kind of get their feet wet. You know what I mean? So with this actually, that's the wide receiver. But yes, that's what I'm talking about, the wide receivers. You pretty much have like the bulk of the guys, here at the top: CeeDee Lamb, Pickens, Turpin, Tolbert, like I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of these guys, even Paris Campbell, and I kind of feel, he probably knows at this point, Paris Campbell, that he probably won't make the team. I'm saying even Moreno Cropper, just with these guys they brought in, even they, like I mentioned earlier, guys like Brooks and Flournoy, they're draft picks, but they have shown something. They have the game reps, with this particular coach who was an OC before, but they have the game reps with Dak. They have somewhat of a chemistry, somewhat of a relationship with Dak as far as passing and throwing. So it's just like, you know, they do have something over Moreno Cropper, over Paris Campbell, who's just kind of getting in here, hasn't really had any kind of run with the team. You know what I mean? And Kelvin Harmon, granted he was a practice squad, but even he having been here for a couple years, I think last year, I think the year before he was here too as well. And I think just guys like Brooks and Flournoy, that would kind of be like their extra step, like they're kind of step above, other players like a Josh Kelly or Moreno Cropper. I think like I was talking about, I think like Botch was saying, the fat would definitely be trimmed, because you can't really make room for guys like that. And even the same thing, like I mentioned earlier, for the running backs, I'm saying, and even especially with these other deep rooms as well, defensive edge, DBs, defensive backs. These rooms are really deep, you know what I mean, including the UDFAs. So it's just really going to be gymnastics. It's really going to be roster gymnastics, trying to, number one, try to cut down, like we talk about, trying to cut down the fat, and then trying to figure out where your stars are going to lay. You know what I mean? Stephen White says, I wanted to draft Mingo and Pickens. I'm stoked. If we could get Darnell Washington too, I'd pee myself. If you're talking about the tight end are you talking about the tight end from the Steelers? If I'm getting the name right, let me know, Stephen White. That's who you're talking about. That's who you're talking about, man. I would love. That tight end is huge over there, man. Not saying I wanted him last year, but I like his size. I think he can, talk about blocking, talking about catching. I mean, they were going to him like a receiver. You feel me? When they weren't going to Pickens, they weren't going to him a lot, but every now and then when he was catching the ball at the boundary, like he was pushing guys off of him. You know what I'm saying? That's just, like I said, in my opinion, just really, I would just love a tight end like that. That side. That's why I was excited to have, a Brevin Spanford, and not even just about the tight end position, but just having a, like I was talking about earlier, a tall receiver, someone who can, kind of high point the ball, also someone who's physical. Okay. I'm just making sure I had it right, Stephen White. Yeah, man, that tight end is insane, bro. Like we talked about last year with Jake Ferguson kind of being like an extension of the O-line. Like he is literally like almost the size of an O-lineman. And to see him go out there and just run like it's nothing, catch passes like it's nothing, like I was definitely looking at him last season, like, you know what I'm saying, right? Another tackle that catches and stretches, bro. Like, man, he went off. You know what I'm saying? And I'm trying to remember the player. I think there was a player in this draft this past. I think he was like a DT. I forget his name, but there was a player who I was like looking at this past draft who was like, he was a DT, but he also played tackle, I think, at one point. And then I think at one point in the season they used him like on a special play. It was like a fake, but they ended up going to him for like a touchdown or something like that. And I'm like, man, that is insane, bro. Like if we could use like Brevin Spanford in that manner, just really use like a big body guy, you know what I'm saying, who the offense isn't expecting to go out there, you know what I'm saying, or even like I mentioned earlier, guy. Like I said, I forget his name. Man, I can't remember his name, you guys. My bad. But yeah, it's just having sometimes at least for me, the physicality kind of matters with some of these players. Like, yeah, you can bring in, years ago, you can bring in a T.Y. Hilton. You can bring in a Brandon Cooks, you know what I'm saying? But sometimes we need those guys with stature. You can bring in who's the guy from that they brought in from the Packers, way back when. They brought Randall Cobb, you know what I'm saying? Like these guys were kind of on the smaller side. So, they brought in Pickens, 6'4", you know what I'm saying? I believe he's 6'4". You know what I'm saying? I just like the fact that, he's tall, you know what I'm saying? The guy on the other side of CD, and then at least in my opinion, the other side of things, as far as DBs, we need tall physical corners as well. We have big 6'2", but, they brought in a Kyer Elam who's 6'1", but they drafted Savon Revel who's 6'3". And then another thing I'm excited about is that they're giving Wanye Thomas and Israel Mukwamo, both very tall, safety / they're giving him a chance to play corner. But I like to see that tall physicality. I'm saying we definitely need that. Steven said, this draft I wanted Tyler Warren. We could have got him too. I don't know if I got a great look at Tyler Warren, but I definitely did hear his name a lot during the draft. So I'm definitely, yeah, I'm just excited overall. Gonna kind of close out here soon. But let me see what else is on my list. Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to talk too much about it because, like I mentioned earlier with the press conference, we saw what Jerry was talking about with Trayvon and stuff, and I mean, it seems like it's all out into the open right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, Jerry's kind of just like this. This is pretty much what I got from Jerry in the press conference. He pretty much saying I'm living for now. You guys can see how old I'm getting. Pretty much what I say goes. But the same, like, as far as with I don't know, as far as Trayvon, the way he was talking about him, and as we know, I think at the beginning of the offseason, he was talking about how he didn't put in the work and things like that. And as we know, Trayvon, they haven't got a chance to watch it yet, but I don't know if he was released it yet. But Trayvon Diggs was putting out some episodes on his blog about, he had episodes titled, the truth about his injury and things like that. So they're kind of going back and forth. I'll just kind of speak briefly on it. I hate to see that. It kind of sucks when, especially a star player, we ask the question all the time of, how do the Cowboys, how did the Joneses treat their players? And, this is one of the situations where it's kind of like, damn, like they're putting all the business out on Front Street. They're not, caring what you got to say. Like they mentioned, like, hey, we docked them. We docked them the $500K. That's part of the contract and things like that. And, I seen tweets saying, well, they didn't deduct it, off CD Lamb when he wasn't there, or, Zach Martin. He's saying, we know Dak was there at camp. So, that's neither here nor there. But it's like, they're really making an example of Diggs. And it kind of sucks, I was listening to DC Universe last night, shout out to them. Very excellent show. And they're absolutely right. They brought up a point that I love hearing is that, a lot Cowboys Nation, me too, but not in a negative way. We kind of forget how Trayvon Diggs was for us a few years ago, because he's kind of been out. He's been out a lot. He's been hurt a lot, and it's just, we hate to throw away an All-Pro player. A player who had 11 interceptions, just a few years ago. It's just like the turnaround is insane. They were absolutely right. The turnaround, like kind of and not just from Cowboys Nation, but from the Joneses. You know what I mean? And it just kind of sucks to see the front office kind of speak on him in this manner. And usually you have to like kind of wonder or, think about how the relationship is. But now we're kind of seeing it on Front Street, you know what I mean? And it's just, Jerry kind of spoke about that, Trayvon's attendance and with him getting paid, what he's getting paid. He says that he expects his highest paid players to, to be in the building, to be with the trainers and follow protocol and things like that. And it just, like I said, I'm not gonna speak too much on it because that's, I don't even like listening to Jerry and Steven as it is. Like, I don't know if you guys even realize, like, listen to the presser. Like, it got to be like 20 minutes into the entire presser before they even asked the football question to Brian Schottenheimer. I just be wishing sometimes that Schottenheimer would get like his own individual presser, because listening to Steven Jerry sometimes can get really, really exhausting. At least for me, I even stopped listening to. I stopped listening to at least Jerry's interviews. I very rarely listen to him anymore, because it can be so long and drawn out. You know what I mean? I just be wanting to hear Schottenheimer or like, even Steven. I listen to Steven every now and then because he kind of gets straight to the point. But kind of like it being as a whole, like sometimes it can be kind of long and drawn out to listen to Jerry. Steven says CJ will take a roster spot again, but he rocks the special teams. Yeah, I was kind of wondering about that. Like CJ Goodwin, because like I don't know, because when Bones was there before, I understand why he was getting a spot, and he does rock his special teams. So I'm wondering if I forget, was it Sorensen? I think his first name is Nick Sorensen. They brought in now to be the special teams coach. We'll see if because we definitely need special teams, especially with a new coach coming in. We know how our special teams looks, how our special teams look. We have Turpin, we have Anger, who does phenomenal punts. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if last season was his greatest year, but I'm definitely glad to have him. You know what I'm saying, in the back pocket. And of course, we know Brandon Aubrey is pretty much lights out. So our special teams is looking right. You know what I mean? So I'm definitely excited to see what. I know it's special teams and everything, but maybe if the rules haven't changed or anything as far as kickoffs, if Sorensen can bring anything different. Steven says Diggs promised to work hard when he signed the contract. They are pissed. another contract with a hurt player that tanked. Yeah, and Steven, Jerry talked about that, and it was kind of gut wrenching to hear, but I think they asked about something about them waiting or something like that, and then Jerry had said something like, "Well, we should have waited on Trayvon and Terrence," and they even brought Steele into it. I'm like, man, like I bet Terrence Steele was like, well, what he say F me for? You know what I'm saying? Like Terrence Steele's probably chilling somewhere, and he was like, dang, you know what I do? You know what I'm saying? So it just, just kind of hear them kind of talk about that. We know that injuries are a part of the game, so it's just like contracts are part of the game. So I'm not sure why Jerry is kind of taking it personal. It's literally just business with these players and with him too. So I'm not sure why he seems to be taking it a little bit personal. You know what I'm saying? It's not your money, Jerry. You feel me? Like it's these players' money who they've earned it. So and I mean, and Steven kind of talked about it a little bit too. I think they were asked about whether they're going to do contracts. While the guys are there at training camp, and Steven kind of said, well, some guys will decide to kind of wait, and then some guys will decide to go ahead and get paid. They kind of try to respect. I think that's something, we know that, Tyler Smith, Deron Bland, Ferg, they're all coming up for contract this season. I think Steven had kind of said, maybe some players might decide to wait. I think Bland maybe is a guy who decided to wait. I think he was maybe one of the ones who told Steve or told the Joneses, hey, let me play one more year. Let me get let me get my numbers up. That'll be better. I'll play better, like Steven said. So I think that's, that's kind of, Oh, what's up, Brian Smith? Thanks for joining us. Yeah, man. He said, I agree. The Joneses are very exhausting to listen to. And he says facts, they earned it. Yeah, I'm not. That's why I don't understand why Jerry's taking it so personal. Because it's just like all these players in the league earn this money. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, and you can say it depends on their play year to year, but like Jerry was pretty much saying in the conference, like it's hard to kind of look down the road 3-4 years from now to kind of put a number on things, and situationally and things like that. It's just like, so it should be the same thing on the flip side. Like you should just pay these players what they've earned. You go by what they've shown. It's kind of hard to project. But you go by the market, but you can't project what they're going to do in years, 2, 3, and 4. So it's just like you just pay the players what they've earned. You know what I mean? So it shouldn't be that complicated. Yeah. I seen that too. And Tyler Smith was saying he was going to leave it up to his agent and said he wasn't trying to think about it. But yeah, he just got that ranking. He actually just recently switched agent. I think he switched to the same agent that Dak has, I think, or I forget what. I think the same agency. I think that Dak has. I'm not 100% sure, but he recently just switched agents and said that Todd Archer also tweeted that out, said that could be a clue that they could be looking to kind of start talking about contract negotiations and things like that. So yeah, it could be maybe for him. Now, I'm sure Bland, maybe Ferg, we can say that about both of those, Bland and Ferg, that both of them kind of had down years last year. Both missed, some of the season. So they could probably try to, use this year as like a earning year. You know what I'm saying? So I think just kind of as we close out here, kind of going back over my list, I just feel like this camp is really I think it's gonna show a lot. I don't want to say a lot, but I feel like. Okay, I kind of go like level by level. I feel like the front office, they've kind of already said, I don't know if they're going to get in Brian's way, but I feel like with the players, they kind of gotten the message across, at least to their highest paid players. Jerry was kind of talking about it today in his presser, like, hey, if we paying you this money, if you're getting, the top 10, 11% of the money on the team, you should be, you should be leading, you should be in attendance. You should be, giving your fullest potential. You should be in the building pretty much. So he pretty much just laid out like what he expects from his top paid players. Hey, what's good, Swain? How you doing, fam? Really appreciate you, fam. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you. Just kind of give my thoughts on training camp. We saw the players touch down today, getting off the bus, and I'm just very excited. Not going out there this season, but I'm definitely excited to see the news. Practice kicks off tomorrow, so I'm gonna be trying to start going live more often, day to day. As I just actually, that's really why this kind of just keeping it real with you guys. Kind of why this has kind of been on the back burner a little bit, because I've been trying to work for like a newer position at work. So my first day is actually tomorrow. So I'm going to be, actually got to come up here in a little bit, kind of study some things for my first day tomorrow. But I'm definitely going to be trying to make more content, as the season kind of kicks off. I'm still going to be doing shows with Star every week on Wednesday. You guys already know that. But Yeah, I'm gonna try to do a live, at least twice a week, at least alone, and these practices start kicking off because like I really wish I was out there in camp, but yeah, this season I said let me just go to like a couple more games and you know what I'm saying, just kind of play that. I definitely, we'll see about heading out there next year though, because with the second year, I feel like Shy's gonna be here for a while. I feel like we'll have it'll be a little bit more ingrained. You know what I'm saying? Our players will be a little bit more seasoned, and I think next year will be just as exciting, if not more exciting. So I definitely be looking forward to camp next season as well. But I'm excited to see what comes out of this camp. Like I kind of just give a summation of what. Let's just talk about the front office. I think the front office should step out the way. You know what I'm saying? But like I said, I feel like they kind of laid their message, their ground message to their highest paid players and what they kind of expect, from pretty much going forward. If you're getting the highest 10, 11%, money from the team, then you should be here. You should be in attendance. You know what I'm saying? You should be, I should see you all the time. You know what I'm saying? As far as the country, what's up, Twine man? Really appreciate you. Thank you. Appreciate you. Steven says, chilling here. My sky looks like Mickey Sky. Nice out. Yeah. I wish I was out here. Trust me, I'll be getting to that shortly, Steven. As soon as I hop up off of here. But yeah, it's nice. Yeah, I kind of missed the summer, but yeah, actually it's been really, really hot. Now that's another reason why I really haven't been outside, because man, it's been crazy hot. Like this month of July has been insane. Like 100 degrees. Supposed to be like 100 degrees again this weekend. It's been insane. So if I'm not out here, I'd definitely be inside, because yeah, it's definitely been crazy hot. But as far as the coaches, I feel like the coaching staff, I talked about this, pretty much about the off season, but I feel like the coaches are also being, kind of brought to a new standard. Kind of, Schottenheimer kind of raised the bar for them too. You brought in a Clayton Adams, you brought in Junior Adams, Derek Foster, Connor Riley. Riley and Adams being from the college level, Junior Adams. You know what I'm saying? But they kind of brought up these coaches, so that way all the pressure isn't on the players. You know what I mean? And I just feel like that's an amazing thing. Like we've seen in previous season, where even just as last season, we've had the DB room, the DB room and the DE room were both hit with injuries really bad, and I just feel like we didn't. And even just a couple of years ago when we had the linebacker problem, right? When we had Marquise Bell taking linebacker reps, right? We didn't have the coaching. We had Scott McCurley. You feel me? And no disrespect, but it's like, sometimes you may not have the personnel, but if you have the coaching, like we heard this a lot about Clayton Adams being over in Arizona. He took some of those, undrafted. He took some of those young rookies, you know what I'm saying, and made an excellent offensive line out of them. You know what I mean? So it's not always about the personnel. You know what I'm saying? It's sometimes about the coaching. I think with these coaching that they brought in, I think, Schottenheimer has put it on them to say, hey, we want to elevate these young guys. We want to elevate these former first round picks, right? So we just kind of see what these coaches can do, and to see if guys like Riley, to see if guys like Junior Adams can take their game to the next level, to see if Clayton Adams, to see if Foster, who've coached guys like Alvin Kamara, who've coached guys like I think Dobbins. I think J.K. Dobbins as well. I think Foster coached J.K. Dobbins as well. So, coaching running backs like that, I think maybe that could be why, at least for me, and I think maybe other people in Cowboys Nation may not be so worried about the running backs, because I think we have the coaching, and I think, we have the coaching for the running backs and the coaching for the offensive line. So, if we bring the right scheme, you know what I'm saying, I think we can kind of get our personnel, to kind of play to that level. And then finally, as we talk about the players, Schottenheimer, one thing I want to mention, he mentioned this in the press conference, a quote from him. He says, kind of the point of OTAs kind of going into camp is to teach it, detail it, perfect it. It's up to the coaches, and of course, coaches to teach it. And then during OTAs is when you detail it, or OTAs, mini camp. OTAs is for teaching it. Mini camp is more so for detailing it. Of course, that's why it's mandatory, right? And then for camp, that's when the players are supposed to perfect it. So the players come in from studying the 4 or 5 week period that they've been off. It's kind of that, it's kind of like that test time. Like Schottenheimer said today, like pretty much the OTAs will kind of be like the same. I mean, training camp will be kind of in the same layout as OTAs. You know what I'm saying? They'll do OTA ones will be, pretty much probably be like week 1, maybe day 1, day 2 of camp, and, so on and so forth. So I feel like, Schottenheimer, maybe kind of not sped through, but kind of, had a quick pace during OTAs and mini camps, so that when the guys do come back, they can pretty much hit the ground running, do what they, instead of having to go over everything, it's not about reviewing. It's about, like he says, it's about perfecting it, knowing what you need to be working on week to week. Say if you're doing OTA 1 for week 1, okay, I want you guys to study this, and when you come back, this is where we're going. This is where we're going to be enforcing, and we're going to be hitting the ground running. And if you guys have questions, ask your teammate. This is where the camaraderie kind of works, or getting to know your teammates personally. That's where it kind of comes in handy. That's why he wanted the guys to kind of get to know each other, to kind of talk to each other. So when they are in camp, you're not nervous to ask the guy next to you. You're not shy. You're not, oh, I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? You already had that relationship with the guy next to you, so you're not afraid to ask that question. You feel what I'm saying? So I think that all this preparation that has gone into going into camp, now it's time to see. I think that was in my description. Now it's time to see if, and that can be reflected on the field. Now it's time to see if Schottenheimer can get the coaches, not just the players, but the coaches and the players, to kind of embrace their roles and to see just how well that all this can kind of come and mesh and kind of gel together. I think we'll see that even not even saying when camp end. I think a nice evaluation to take will probably be when they scrimmage against the Rams, right before that first preseason game. Maybe take a look at those first couple weeks. Maybe the first week without pads and the second week with pads. Maybe see how far these guys have come to progress. And I think we'll start to be able to make some judgments on these guys, not harsh judgments, kind of make some judgments on who the stars will be, who the hard workers are, who the guys that stand out are. And I'm just excited to see what this camp will show us, because it's not just we're not just looking at star players, we're looking at the depth pieces, we're looking at the coaches, we're looking at the how much leash will the front office give Schotty. You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of things that we can look at with camp, but I'm just really excited to see what players kind of show out, and really what these coaching can make of these young players and these former number 1 picks. And I just feel like that they can really show a lot. Hey, what's up, Star? What's up? How you doing? Good to see you, sis. Very happy to see you, man. Really appreciate you. Yeah, I'm just giving my thoughts on camp. They had the presser, man, today, and I was saying earlier, I can't stand listening to Jerry. Listening to Jerry and Steven, man, they talked for like 20 minutes before they even asked Schottenheimer a question. That was wild. So, and speaking of, make sure you guys hop on later this week. Keep your notifications on. And I'm sure me and my girl Star will be hopping on later this week when practice starts. Kicking up in a high gear. Cause at least, by Wednesday, I'm sure we'll start to see some. Some. I know they'll still probably be in shorts and t-shirts, but we'll definitely start to see what players are starting to hopefully separate themselves. And then once we get into pads next week, that'll be exciting as well. But hopefully, it's not. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but really appreciate everybody jumping in and just sharing my thoughts of training camp and what I think these guys will show. And earlier, shout out to Jacob Hurd. I saw you jump on through Facebook. I'm always looking at the Facebook group because I love when you guys tap in from that side. Twyman says, I'm hyped on the new coaching staff. I just hope the players' bodies can keep up to the temp the coaches will bring. And I'm glad you said that, Twyman, because I'm with you on that, because that was something that I think Deuce Vaughn, was it Deuce Vaughn? I think it was Maris Leafout who actually spoke on that, about how the practices are a little bit higher tempo. They run through the whistles, they play. You know what I'm saying, they play at high speed. So I'm with you on that. And I think that's a good observation. You know what I'm saying? I think with these 4 or 5 weeks that they've had off, I think it's great that you make that point, because it'll be about that. And I think Schotty said that it'll be about the practices that separate them from the rest of the league. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with that. It's about conditioning and whether these guys can keep up, whether they have been keeping up. Because if you're starting to try to keep up now, it's too late, right? Like, you should have been playing. You should have been keeping up with conditioning with these 4 or 5 weeks that you had off. So yeah, it's definitely. I'm very happy you made that point, Twy, man, because that's huge. Because these players may not, they may not be used to this tempo, because it was different practices under McCarthy. Yeah, Steven says, we are a young team again. Facts. Yeah, I love the depth that we have. Even with the depth and even the free agents that they brought in. That's a good thing about it, Stephen White. They're young as well. You have Kenneth Murray. I think Sanborn. I think they're both under 25. Maybe I'm not 100% sure, but I think Murray for sure is. So yeah, and even with the free agents, like I mentioned, even they're young. You know what I mean? Yeah, better balance. Stephen White says, "Yes, sir." When the when the poop hits the fan, we'll see what's up. Yeah, Stephen White. Yeah, and the owner. Yeah, everyone mind. Yeah, everyone stay in your own lanes. Like let this year. I don't say let it play out, but let everyone embrace their roles. And if everyone embraces their roles of how that they were supposed to hack, then yeah, I think things will come together. Yeah, Star says, "Brother, media refuses to ask football It's ridiculous. It's like it's insane. 20 minutes into a presser, and I'm glad that Patrick Nosey Walker actually said that. Like, here's a football question for Schotty because and I don't even mind listening to Steven and Jerry, but it's like the media already know they talk for like 10 minutes on one question, so it's like, and then another thing that got me is like y'all bringing up the stuff that's not even like I heard Turpin's arrest brought up as like the last question. It's one thing to go to a whole presser, but the last question about Turpin's arrest, like really, I'm like, come on, man. Yeah, I said that earlier too. Since I can't wait until Shai just gets his solo oppressors. You know what I'm saying? And or even in introductory pressure. I wish they would give him a separate presser and just give Jerry and Steven their own pressure because it's ridiculous because it don't make sense. Yeah, I'm just about tired of hearing Jerry talk because like I think I heard you say it last night on DC Universe. It's like they've been quiet like pretty much the whole offseason. Like you really haven't heard much from Steven or Jerry really like since the beginning of the offseason. I think before they started moving real heavy in free agency. So or maybe even draft, when they were talking about how they moved to get George Pickens and stuff like that. But, ooh, these mosquitoes, sorry. But yeah, like, they've been quiet the whole offseason, and then all of a sudden, I guess that's why, I guess they've been quiet, and now they feel they got to talk their heads off. So it's just, it's crazy. Yeah, it's the media. Yeah, it's definitely the media, man. Because I even heard one, before I get out of here, I heard one journalist say, like, yeah, Schotty, how do you even trying to get Schotty into it? Like, yeah, Schotty, how do you feel about, a player, because they're going through contracts and stuff like that? How do you feel about them not being on the field? Like, does it make you feel like they're not totally committing? And it's like, how are you not going to put that on the player? That's the front office not coming through with the contracts. So is the player not committing? Like, I just get so tired of those, like, I don't know. They make it seem like it's open-ended questions, but they're not. They kind of walk them into that. It's just like, Star said, I'm tired of crashing out over Jerry. Yeah, he runs the same play every offseason. I'm over it. I'm just focused on football for the sake of facts. They got me last year, not this year. I'm with you, sis. That's 100% true because it's like, I be finding myself fast forwarding through Jerry's part because it's just like, you ain't talking about nothing, bro. Like I said earlier, the main nugget I got from Jerry is that he's living for now. You know what I'm saying? Because he was like, you guys can see, how old I'm getting and things like that. So hopefully that means, you make a little bit more moves for the now. You know what I'm saying? You're a little bit more focused on the actual season here at heart, and maybe, you focus on, going to get a better DT. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they got a pick and they did shore up some depth, but they're still, and actually there's one thing. Another thing, last thing before I get out, you guys, I promise, last thing, because Patrick Nosey Walker, shout out to him. He actually asked a question about what are some things from last year that you guys felt like you need to improve on. And Schotty said turnovers and consistency will be one of the main focuses at camp. And even Jerry kind of chimed in and said that, I feel like we kind of learned from some of our mistakes, from last season. But I'm just like, I don't know. I know you guys you guys definitely went heavy in free agency, but they definitely, I mean, as you guys mentioned last night on the DC Universe, are definitely, you haven't gone after one tech. You know what I'm saying? Even with this DB room, Shotty mentioned that there was going to be, competition, may kind of throw up the consistency. I know they're looking for, some staple guys, but it's still going to be rotation when you get into the season because, yeah, you have your starters. Like you have, who you guys will start the season off with now, like possibly Revel, right? Or Kyer Elam, of course, Bland. But then if Diggs is better, and where you fit him in, or of course you making the number one DB when he comes back. But then what do you do with Elam? You move him to the other side, maybe you sit Revel if he's healthy enough, maybe you sit him, get the reps to Elam. I'm saying, of course, then you have Kalen Carson. Like you have all these guys. I had to look up earlier. Let me see if I still have it back up right here. Yeah, and I mean, other guys like Andrew Booth. I think the other guys probably be practice squad. Maybe guys like Booth, maybe Booth. But Troy Pride, Keemon Hall. I'm definitely a huge fan of Keemon Hall. But I'm saying it's gonna be some. It's gonna definitely be some, some tossing and turning in that DB room because with everything that everybody is going through, whether they're coming back from injury, whether they're a rookie, trying to get back like Revel, he tore his ACL last season too. So it's just like, Kalen coming back from a shoulder injury. It's a lot. It's a lot for this DB room. And, like I said, I'm just looking for camp to kind of pop off and just to see what players will separate themselves from the other because, it's a lot of different levels. You have veterans, you have rookies, you have guys who may not have a sponsor in the room anymore, who are still young, maybe still trying to figure out where they fit in. We have a lot of second-year guys who may have lost their sponsor with Zimmer walking out the door, you know what I mean? So it's just, with this turnover, it could create some questions, but I think this camp will definitely answer them questions. So, yeah, and last point, I agree with you. I wish we could sit Revel this year and he'll right. Yeah, I do too, you know what I'm saying? And I think Revel can really be. I love his stature. I love his length. And I love his attitude that he plays with on the field. And I don't, you hate to rush, especially a rookie. You hate to rush a rookie in any kind of sense as far as just playing, period. But especially a rookie coming back from injury, you definitely don't want to. You definitely want to do that. Yeah, and Star says exactly. Jerry says the same stuff. He's always going to shade players when it comes to health and contract. He does it on purpose to make headlines. It's a shame. And I was saying that earlier, Star. Like I don't know why he's taking it personal because it's not like it's his money. Like it's not like his directly like his money that he's paying to these players. So they earned it, pay them their money. You know what I'm saying? You get the job done and you get the head, like you say, you get the headline of making the deal, and then the player gets his money, he gets to go and support his family and be his family and think, live his dream and, go off and do different ventures with that money. I'm saying, like, just let these players live their lives. Like either have these guys are young kids, I'm saying, or young, family men trying to support their, not just their families, but, their immediate families, their moms, their dads, just trying to, a shout out to you, Star. I heard you say this on one of your shows recently. I know it's basketball, but like I said, Angel Reese retiring her mom. Like, all of us out here wish we could retire our mom, retire our dads. You know what I mean? So let these players do that. Like Stephen White earlier said, or not Stephen White, but let me see if I'm gonna get the name right. Man, my Facebook guy. Dang, I missed it. Dang. Let me see. Oh, Brian Smith. Yeah, like Brian Smith said earlier. Like, yeah, they've earned this money. So let these players, just give them their money. I forget the trend that was going on IG, but yeah, man, show them that money. But yeah, y'all. Yeah, let me get up out of here because it's about 9:30 and I got to study for my first day tomorrow. So yeah, Steven says 100 Mickey corners can get scared. Yeah, scarred early, playing too soon. We saw it last year with Carson. Yeah, and Carson was picked on. You know what I mean? So imagine Revel. Like we saw how Carson was picked on bad. And that was the Saints game. What, the second game out the gate? I don't know if Revel's gonna be starting. You know what I mean? But yeah, you're a rookie. You're coming back from injury, and you're getting picked on. Like that's not a great combination to leave anybody. You know what I mean? Excuse me. I'm sorry, especially a rookie. So hopefully we can. Let Revel chill and, we'll definitely see how this DB room kind of get all the kinks out of it. And, once camp starts up and, once they get the pads on, of course, I think that's when these players will start showing that, exactly what potential they have. But I really, really do appreciate it. Now, I really can't thank you guys enough. Pretty much my first show back after my first solo show back after this off season, and you guys just really came through showing some support. And like I said, I want to try to go live more throughout the week, as these practices start to ramp up. But Stephen White, Ryan Smith, my girl Star, of course, coming through showing love. Swain, Twyman, Dak Owens, Lee Harrison, Jacob, and also Brian on the Facebook group. Really appreciate you guys showing some love. Yeah, like Star says, make sure you guys hit the like button, and yeah, make sure, like I said, keep your notifications on because we will be coming through on Wednesday with some news for you guys. Really appreciate you guys coming through, showing support. Make sure you hit the like, hit the share, hit the subscribe. And let me get my outro up real quick because I forgot to add the outro. But and don't mind the outro, y'all. You know, just like a last little note. Don't mind the outro. I know it's Bones Fossil still in this drink. I gotta update my my outro. I did the intro, but I forgot to do the outro. So, you know, like I said, don't mind it. It's Bones. You know, technically it's not 2025 yet, so he's technically still on the team. You know, if you will. But really appreciate you guys coming through. I really, really love you guys, Cowboys Nation. Peace out. Please show love, like, comment, share, and subscribe. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out.